Most people think the reason you've never tasted these fruits is because they're rare. That's not true. You've never tasted them because somewhere along the way the knowledge was broken. For thousands of years, these fruits weren't exotic or unusual. They were survival. Entire communities depended on them, shaped their seasons around them, built traditions and trade networks around them. And now, almost all of that is gone. In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you 12 native fruits that quietly disappeared from modern diets. Not because they failed, but because they didn't fit the system we replaced them with, and somewhere in this list is a fruit that was once illegal to grow. But before we get there, you need to understand what we lost. Let's start with the one that should have never disappeared in the first place: Pawpaw. Fruit number 1. Pawpaw. This is where everything starts to feel wrong, because the pawpaw shouldn't be forgotten. It's rich, soft, almost custard-like, with a flavor that feels like mango and banana blended into something even better. For generations, tribes across the eastern woodlands relied on it every fall, and even explorers survived on it when nothing else was left. But the moment food had to travel, had to sit on shelves, had to look perfect under supermarket lights, the pawpaw became useless. It bruises too easily, it rots in days, so it vanished. Not because it lacked value, but because it had too much life in it to be industrialized. And only now, slowly, people are realizing what they lost. Fruit number 2. American Persimmon. Not the perfect, glossy fruit you see in stores today, but something smaller, wilder, and far more intense. When it's ripe, it tastes like brown sugar, dates, and late autumn all at once. But if you pick it too early, it punishes you. Dry, bitter, unforgettable. And that unpredictability is exactly why it disappeared. Industrial agriculture doesn't tolerate timing. It needs control. But for the people who understood it, this fruit wasn't inconvenient. It was a ritual. Waiting for the exact moment it softened, knowing when it was ready, that knowledge used to be passed down. Now, in most places, it's gone. Fruit number 3. Maypop. Most people don't even realize North America has its own wild passion fruit. It grows quietly, vines spreading fast, fruit dropping the moment it's ready, almost like it doesn't want to be found unless you're paying attention. The flavor is sharp, tropical, alive, but it doesn't wait for you. Miss the window, and it's gone. That alone made it incompatible with markets. But beyond the fruit, the plant itself mattered, used for calming, for medicine, for balance. And when that knowledge faded, the plant didn't disappear. People just stopped seeing it. Fruit number 4. Beach plum. Small, dark, and intensely flavored, growing where almost nothing else will. Right along the edge of the ocean in sand and salt. It survived in places that looked uninhabitable. And for coastal communities it was essential. But those same spaces became some of the most valuable land in the world. Houses replaced dunes. Development replaced ecosystems. And the plant that once held the shoreline together, both physically and culturally, was pushed out. What remains now is scattered, fragile, and only just beginning to return through restoration efforts. Fruit number 5. Wild plum. Before agriculture standardized everything, fruit wasn't uniform. It was diverse, unpredictable, adapted to its exact environment. Wild plums existed everywhere, each region with its own variation, its own flavor, its own resilience. They could survive drought, pests, extremes that modern crops struggle with. But they weren't perfect in appearance. They weren't identical, and that made them incompatible with a system built on sameness. So they were replaced. Not because they were worse, but because they were too different. Fruit number 6. Choke cherry. The name alone pushes people away, and maybe that's why it was easy to forget. Raw, it's harsh, astringent, almost unpleasant but transformed. Dried, cooked, preserved. It becomes something deep and rich, almost like wine. For many Plains cultures, it wasn't optional. It was survival, mixed into dense, long-lasting food that could sustain life through the harshest conditions. But when landscapes changed, when ranching expanded, these trees were seen as a problem. Removed, cleared, and with them, a critical piece of survival knowledge disappeared too. Fruit number 7, the one that wasn't just forgotten, but restricted. Wild grapes. Not the soft, sweet versions engineered for convenience, but something tougher, more complex, more alive. These grapes carried intensity, thick skins, strong flavors, higher resilience. But they also carried risk to commercial crops. And for a time, that was enough. Restrictions, removals, control. And slowly, people stopped interacting with them altogether. Today, they still grow. Untouched, climbing through forests along rivers, but most people walk right past them, not even knowing what they are. Fruit number 8, hackberry. At first glance, it doesn't even seem worth the effort. Small, thin layer of sweetness around a hard seed. But that's only if you're looking at it the wrong way. For thousands of years, people didn't separate the seed. They used the whole thing, ground it, turned it into something dense, nutritious, sustaining. This wasn't snack food, this was survival engineering. But that kind of effort doesn't fit into modern systems. Too slow, too inefficient. So it was abandoned, even though the tree itself is nearly indestructible, still thriving in places where almost nothing else can. Fruit number 9, buffalo berry. Bright, sharp, almost aggressively sour, growing in massive clusters across harsh landscapes. But this plant did more than produce fruit. It improved the soil itself, working with the land instead of against it. It was part of a system, tied to animals, tied to ecosystems that no longer exist in the same way. When those systems collapsed, so did the fruit's role. And without that context, it became just another unfamiliar berry, easy to ignore, easy to forget. Fruit number 10, Oregon grape. Not actually a grape, but something far more complex. Deep blue, intensely tart, and loaded with compounds people once relied on as medicine. This wasn't just food. It was treatment, protection, knowledge passed through generations. But modern systems separate food and medicine, regulate, restrict, redefine. And in that process, plants like this fall into a gray zone. Harder to access, harder to use, easier to lose. Yet it still grows, quietly in poor soil and shade, needing almost nothing. Fruit number 11, wild strawberry. Tiny, almost impossibly small compared to what you see in stores. But the flavor, concentrated, explosive, something that makes everything else feel artificial. These strawberries weren't just eaten, they marked time. The first fruit of the season, tied to ceremony, to gratitude, to cycles, people understood deeply. But they need space, undisturbed land, edges of forests, places we keep removing. And as those spaces disappear, so does the experience of ever tasting something that real. Fruit number 12, serviceberry. One of the earliest fruits to ripen each year, arriving right when it was needed most. Sweet, soft, with a subtle complexity most people would never expect. It fed people after long winters, marked transitions, held meaning beyond nutrition. But like so many others, it was never scaled, never standardized, never pushed into the system that decides what we eat. So it remained where it always was, quiet, resilient, and largely invisible to the modern world. And here's the part most people don't want to think about. None of these fruits disappeared because they couldn't survive. They're still here, growing in forests, along coastlines, across fields and mountains, waiting. What disappeared was our connection to them. The knowledge of when to harvest, how to prepare them, why they mattered in the first place. And once that knowledge is gone, it doesn't come back easily. It takes intention. It takes people choosing to care again. Because this isn't just about food. It's about diversity in a system that's becoming dangerously narrow. It's about resilience in a world where climate is becoming unpredictable. And more than anything, it's about remembering that the way we eat today is not the only way it's ever been. So if even one of these fruits caught your attention, don't just scroll past it. Look it up. Find it. Plant it if you can. Support the people who are trying to bring these plants back before they disappear for real. And if you want to see the vegetables that were lost in the exact same way, the ones that might matter even more, you already know what to do.